Ladies and gentlemen, this is Weighing In. I'm David Mirikitani. He's Grant Turner. We're brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. That stuff is so clean, it even makes a guy like me look pretty good. What's up, GT? How's the weekend?
Oh, it was great. Yeah, all sorts of really good stuff, man.
Yep, and you're finally on Iowa soil. You know, you were getting your frequent flyer and diamond and platinum miles in. So
Yep.
Mark Ostrainer can't be with us today, so we're going to do our best to do the heavy lifting without him. Tons of stuff. I always laugh. I always worry on like Friday or Saturday we're not going to have something to talk about on Monday, and 5 things always pop up. So a couple of really historical things. Let's start out with women's wrestling in the state of Iowa. Mark will be bummed that he's not on this because Iowa Central is one of the schools, and then Wartburg is one of the schools. So a Division III and a junior college, along with obviously the University of Iowa, which we've talked about. Just more opportunities for young ladies to get to wrestle, right?
Yeah, I mean the collegiate opportunities are expanding. Yeah, and a lot of these schools are taking an opportunity to invest in it. So hopefully, with all of the investment that these colleges are taking, that we are able to outfit with proper coaches and give these girls a really good chance at success at the collegiate level.
And it bears repeating, but we've talked about this before, but wrestling teaches so many life lessons that are not gender specific, right? Like the importance of hard work, winning with class, losing with humility, being a good teammate, learning to work hard on your own. All of these things are not more applicable to a man or a woman or a boy or a girl. It's part of stopping the softening of our country. It's part of keeping us tough as human beings. And, whichever set of stuff you were born with as a person, these things are irrelevant to that. So Iowa Central has been a perennial powerhouse in junior college on the men's side. Wartburg's been a perennial powerhouse on the Division III side in men. So I would expect them to take this seriously. I don't think they're doing it just to add a sport for the sake of adding a sport, right?
Yeah, I think both institutions are going to have an immediate impact within the state and fabric of Iowa. Potentially even getting to the point where Iowa High School Athletic Association will sanction women's wrestling within the state, giving more opportunities for more people to become USA Wrestling officials, coaching specifically into the women's aspect of, freestyle wrestling. And just the explosion of just that at the high school level and youth level, and seizing the opportunity to build it from the ground up. I think, anytime that you have that, especially in a state like Iowa, I think you're going to do very well.
You make a great point. Some of these things literally are growing the sport of wrestling. Like, people throw that term around a lot. It gets used, I think, a little too liberally. But yeah, when you add programs, right? Like now you're adding 30 kids, probably minimum at each school that are going to wrestle, right? A couple more people are going to be able to stay in coaching. Like you said, now there's going to be more officiating jobs. And I think the big thing you said in that statement is now the pressure, the positive pressure for the state of Iowa to certify women's wrestling, or, to sanction it, whatever the correct term is. But yeah, like Missouri's actually already done it. We have our own separate girls state tournament, and it's gotten so big, they're talking about literally dividing it into 2 classes, which is amazing, because like 7 years ago, that would just, been a pipe dream. So, congrats to those 2 schools. Thanks to those 2 schools. And we're excited to see what happens there. So here's another historical one. Morgan State is going to establish a wrestling program. The term HBCU has been thrown around a bunch. That stands for Historically Black College or University, just for people that don't know. For other people that don't know, because this would not be expected, I'm part of the Black Wrestling Association. So I knew about this at our annual meeting. Huge shout out to Jahi Jones and to Carrie McCoy, who've done a lot of the heavy lifting on this. Obviously, Novogratz, super critical in this on the financial side. That can't in any way be, that is the story. Everybody else can do the work. If somebody doesn't stroke a check, then it doesn't happen. But this is, again, talking about growing wrestling, right? I'm old enough to remember there was a national finalist with one of those cool little helmet headgears from Morgan State University, like in 1980, 81, when I was like in junior high. And I don't think when you're 11, you don't understand the significance of that, GT, but this is huge. This is gigantic, right?
Well, I mean, I think growth at, the NCAA Division I level, it has, I mean, anytime that we can get a program back, and the fact that it's at a HBCU is also a humongous milestone in the fabric of wrestling, as we can all attest to over the time that we've been watching collegiate wrestling. So I think the opportunity, the precedent that they're basically being able to be set there, once again, you've already, you hit the major players there. So, I mean, those guys without, Novogratz and, the BWA and, some of the other, men behind the scenes that maybe don't get enough credit, bringing a program back from the dead. That's very cool. I mean, it's historic. I'm really looking forward to the first time somebody from Morgan State steps out onto the mat at the NCAA wrestling tournament and you just see the place erupt.
Yes, that's what's going to happen for sure. I mean, they did it this year for Little Rock for the first time they had a qualifier, and
Yeah.
nothing, no shame on Neil Ersman, but that's not the same level of historical accomplishment as an HBCU school putting a guy back out there. I got to give a shout out to Jahi Jones again. He and I ran the gala together. So I worked with him literally hand in hand for about 9 weeks. Super young guy, wrestled in Maryland for Kerry and then for Alex Clemson, who was a buddy, who's a good buddy of mine that came on our sort of racial equality podcast I did over at Track when everything was sort of popping off a couple of years ago. And he's a deep dude, man. Like, but those two guys had a great influence on Jahi, but Jahi's Jahi. Like, he's his own man. He's a young guy. He listens, but he's got his own opinions and he's a doer. Like when, Grant, how it is when we work on projects, it's like, okay, I'll call you in a week. This is my task list. This is your task list. He got his task list done every week. And that's probably one of the biggest things I can say about somebody, because most of the people I know always just have a reason why it didn't happen. And he's not that guy. And that's rare, period. You and I both know that. We work with a lot of people that create alibis and excuses. And it's the younger a person is, the more rare it is. Like as people grow up, they mature and they take more accountability. But he's a young 20s guy, like 24, and he's doing everything from running rap concerts to doing this stuff. Like, he's a guy that's got it together, got his accounting degree. So BWA is lucky to have him. And I consider Jahi a good friend of mine. He's a guy that I just like as a person, great personality, and obviously a great, great young man. And I was talking to him every week, just basically being his cheerleader. Like if he got slowed down, just all gas, no brakes, kid, keep doing what you're doing kind of thing. Sometimes that helps, man, just having somebody that believes in you, right? Having an old guy in your corner. So
yeah.
Anyway, so super exciting time there. I heard from an extremely reliable source that Nick Suriano is going to end up at Penn State University. There are so many layers to this. I don't even know where to get started. I'll throw a few things out. One is he's going back to Penn State after having been there. That's certainly interesting. Two is when you go 4.44, that means you had to have gotten your degree, which means he's been working academically this whole time. Third thing is he's only going to be wherever he goes, Penn State or otherwise, for one semester. So, I mean, he's either finished up his school or is he finishing up his school to have his degree by the time he starts in January? And fourth of all, if he goes to Penn State, he's going 25. He's not going 33 because they're not going to bump up RBY and Nick Lee and everybody else, So I had bet Mark, Play to Wings. I'm like, if he comes back, he's coming back at 25 because I know his dad for sure. Once they want to be the guy that beat Spencer Lee. I don't think they see anything special in just winning a national title at 33. Not that he would, but I think they're trying to accomplish something epically. So any of those subjects or anything else about Suriano, the floor is yours.
I'm just going to give big old bowl of popcorn for this season, man. Just every week, like, is he at 25? Is he at 33? Do they, all of the things, right? And then all of the layers of him leaving the program, then going to Rutgers, and then, basically taking like almost a year off, and then training all over the place and working on his freestyle. And then, I mean, the layers to this story specifically, regardless of where he ends up, this dude is a factor that you have to factor in for whatever weight class that he ends up going at. Because, he could just be like, hey, I'm going to go 25. And I want to be the guy that tries to dethrone Spencer Lee. He could, and then if for whatever reason he wants to decide that he's like, hey, man, I'm coming after the national champ in my own room. Like, what fireworks would you have there? Like, all of a sudden,
sure that's been worked out ahead of time.
Right.
Sure.
Well, but like, college kids are college kids. Sometimes maybe the weight cut is a little bit difficult. And I mean, a lot of that would have to be agreed upon, or you would hope that it would be agreed upon.
Well,
So,
yeah.
I mean, as far as like you saying there's layers to the story, there's layers upon layers upon layers.
This is a lasagna.
Absolutely. This is wrestling. This is wrestling lasagna for sure. And I think the thing that is the most intriguing, I would say, even polarizing about Siriano, is that you're going to feel a certain way about his talent level, his persona, and all these type of things. And I just think that it's really, really good for him to continue to build his brand within the college landscape. I would not have wanted to lose him out to the college wrestling game just for him to go international. I think I really want to have him in the NCAA wrestling tournament conversation for everybody in the country.
So let's talk about the tournament, okay? Because this has implications at an individual weight class and implications in the team race, okay? Yep. So you are obviously would follow us last year. I know you watched and listened to our pods, but you weren't a part of it last year. We had multiple sources last year. We had Intermat, Flow, Amateur Wrestling News, Win, and Track. And obviously Track and the Open Mat. And Track is not doing rankings this year, and the Open Mat hasn't put rankings out this year. So we're actually down to 4 sources. But what we would do is just put them across the board, take the average, low numbers the best, high numbers the worst kind of thing. And what Mark and I would point out every week is just where we saw inconsistencies, or people there's a lot of volatility, or somebody we thought that was ranked outside of the top 8 that we thought could place, that kind of stuff. We're not pouring over 330 names, pointing out a couple guys in each weight. So right now, the average ranking, Spencer Lee is at 1.0, Glory 2.5, Vito 2.75, Brandon Courtney 3.75. I think if Suriano goes 25, you have to rank him 2 because he's a national champion. Albeit it was a long time ago, and albeit it was at a different weight class, but I don't see how you can. He's placed first and second in nationals. That's better than Glory. That's better than Arujau. That's better than Courtney. It's not as good as Lee, and he lost to Lee head to head. So I think he immediately is 2, which whoever he's 4, that's 16 team points added to the projection. Okay. And, that also bumps all those other schools down a slot. If you go to 33 and he goes to a different school, I think he's 2 again. Right now it's RBY. These are really easy averages. RBI is 1, Dayton Fix is 2, Sebastian Rivera is 3, Stevan Misek is 4, DeSantos 4.25, Corbin Myers 5.25, which are 5 and 6. I think he's got to go ahead of Dayton. He beat Dayton in college head to head in the national finals. You can certainly make an argument that Dayton won the bracket, the 61 kilo bracket, then took second in the world, and Suriano didn't even make the finals, right? I mean, that, that's an argument. That's where rankings get interesting. At the very least, he's 3rd ahead of Rivera.
Yeah.
Okay. So either way, he's a 16 or a 13.5 point guy, depending on who's, and if he's at 16 points and you add that to Penn State's lineup, Mark and I were talking about how that would impact. It's a lot easier to figure out how it impacts a dual meet because you got to start putting points together and everything else. But Penn State has a team this year that's really weird. They have a bunch of guys ranked as high as they can be, and they got a bunch of guys that are almost off the board. Okay, like RBY's 1, Nick Lee's 1, Carter Starachi's 1, Aaron Brooks is 1. Those 4 guys are 1. Max Dean, they have ranked 2 behind Ferrari. Okay, if Soriano comes in, he's 2. You have 6 guys that are ranked in the finals, and then you've got like Bo Bartlett, a Joe Lee, a Robbie Howard, who are not ranked at all. Real, I mean, they might be like, I don't know, 16 on down, but that's a point. And then Kirkfleet, who's ranked, who could do better or worse, but it feels like there's tiers there where like Gable, Paris, and Cassiopeia are kind of above everybody else. He's ranked in that 4 through 8 range with a bunch of other guys. So this is the opposite of the team they had when Soriano was a freshman, where none of those kids were ranked and they just walked Oklahoma State down, in the rankings and beat them in the duel and everything else. But if he goes to Penn State at 25, they have 7 projected guys in the finals, I think. 25, 33, 41. Starachi makes 4.
Brooks 5.
Brooks is 5. And Max Dean 6. That's 6 finalists.
It's craziness.
Iowa would have 25, 41, 74, and they have Marinelli ranked 2nd. So, they'd have 4 finalists. So you're talking about in the deepest tournament of all time, 2 teams could have half the finalists if you go off the rankings. Obviously, goofy stuff happens. That probably won't all happen. But like you said, this is a popcorn kind of year. And that dual meet thing, this is why I wish Ostrander was on. So he has a theory that Iowa's going to keep Spencer Lee on a pitch count this year. That he's not going to wrestle every duel, that, no ACLs, and that he's probably not going to wrestle any of the elite guys during the regular season to give them more tape or time on the mat with them. He thinks they actually won't wrestle him in the duel versus Penn State if Soriano's there. He's like, if they have Robbie Howard, he thinks they'll wrestle him because he just get on top once and just do what he does to everybody and turn him. Mm-hmm. So are you hearing anything like that, or what are your thoughts on that?
I don't have any inside sources that would tell me to publicly say that. I understand the theory behind, conserving an athlete, or especially one that has as much injuries as Spencer has had in his career. And once again, dodging people, whatever, like I don't get into that. Once again, if I'm Spencer Lee's coach, and he's had historically some, knee issues. Yeah, of course I'm going to make sure that he's ready and wanting to go. And I may say, hey, you're only going to do 20 matches this year. Right. That includes the NCAA tournament. That includes the Big Tens. That includes duels where I feel like I need to put you out there for the team for us to win. And once again, that is up to Tom and Terry Brands and their opinion of how they want to handle this year for Spencer. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, it's not great as a fan, but you're right. They got to do what's best for him.
And once again, I am a fan. I'm also like a coach, as you are. You have to take it in once again, it's the same thing with let's say the NBA and what all these other things. And I think one of those things is if he's good to go, then he's supposed to go. I don't want to hide people or play a card that I don't need to play, but hey, if you're ready to go, let's go. And, once again, if it's a pitch count thing or something along those lines, if I'm wrestling Nick Sirianno in the duel and the duel's on the line, I'm busting Spencer out. I want that to go down. I want to win all the things. So, but to Ostrander's theory, I could see it. I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to it, but as a fan, yeah, hey, man, it's your job, and go out there and compete every weekend. So
yeah, for sure. And you know what? I've said this before. You've done this, and I've done this. Your responsibility is to the family and the kid, the one that you sat in the living room with and said, I'm going to take care of your son. Okay. They had that conversation with Mr. and Mrs. Lee. And so it doesn't matter what we want to see at the duel. They're going to do what's best for him. I should also say nobody in the world thinks Tom and Terry Brands or Ryan Morningstar are going to duck anybody for anything. They pop out on Sunday just to play cornhole with you to kick your butt. So, no, I don't want any of that implied at all. So this is, I mean, all you have to do is watch any 2-minute interview with either one of those guys to be like, that's crazy. I've been lucky enough to interview both of them, and it's a high end, like, you feel like you have to bring your A game when you interview those guys. You feel like they'll just go, hey, those are bad questions. I'm done now. Like you got like most people, like, I'll let you get away with some bad ones, not those guys. So it's going to be fascinating. That duel's already, the duel of the year, along with the Iowa Oklahoma State one because of the location. So Iowa's going to be in 2 of the biggest duels of the year. So to change gears now, let's go over to Super 32s. I don't feel like we're going to do as good of a job on this, or intentionally do a good a job of this as like the Willie Sailors of the world, the Flow guys. They live in this space. I will go big picture on what I saw, and I think this is a massive understatement, but high school wrestling just continues to get freakishly good every year. It's, we've talked about these RTCs, these clubs, like the clubs like Pinnacle that Nike's a part of. Like when you have Jared Lawrence and Brandon Paulson coaching you in the 8th grade, you probably are going to be a lot better than if your mom and dad coached you in the 8th grade, that kind of thing. The level of wrestling is great. I need to just give a quick shout out. We had like 7 kids that wrestled in Border Brawl that placed at Super 32s. KJ Miley made the finals. Faith Cole made the finals. Angelo Ferrari went 9-1 and took 3rd. Zan Fugit went 9-1 and took 3rd. Paige Wermeister was 4th. We had a couple other kids, but I mean, Dragan Arini made it to the blood round and then lost to the number 1 guy and then lost again on the back, but he was one of our O-dubs along with Faith. So really cool to see those kids do so well. Lauritsen and Molly Allen, both from George Ivanoff's club, both placed. So, I mean, we had a bunch of kids that did great. And again, we don't take any credit for them. We have nothing to do with how good they are, but you and I have talked about this because you've helped me build this event. The alumni of that, as that continues to grow, is really awesome. But these kids, just all of them, man, when you get to those, like the Sweet 16 on, it's stupid good, man. Like it's ridiculous good, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think Super 32s, preseason nationals, anytime that you can get to go to like national capable tournaments, it does shine a light for those guys. It's like, hey man, you made finals. Like that's a big deal. And especially like these kids that are up and coming, it gives them an opportunity to compete. Super 32 has been an amazing event for a long time now. And those guys that go out there and compete at that tournament, yeah, man, I'm super impressed with the level of wrestling. I'm super impressed with how the kids handle themselves, and once again, the brackets, you can go 5-2 and not place, like you can go there and have yourself a pretty dang good tournament and then, not bring home any hardware, but wrestle some great matches.
That happened. One of the kids wrestling our event went 5-2. His dad posted it. He lost to the number of guys that took 4th and 5th, and then beat like 4 state champs, so, I mean, it's kind of hard to explain, like to like a girl at school, you're like, oh, you didn't place. You're like, you don't understand. I wrestled amazing.
I'm still pretty good. Like
I'm like actually got better, like people still like me, yeah, it's, and like obviously Fargo's the premier freestyle and Greco tournament. It feels like preseason national Super 32 and the NHSCAs along with Ironman, but Ironman's a little different just because it's hard to get invited to that if you're not at a premier school or just super elite. And even if you get invited, it's weird because like they'll invite just you. So it's like you and me go up there and the rest of the team gets left behind. Where Super 32s, you're not school affiliated. Like obviously some of those guys like, and I should give a shout out to Wyoming Sem, Cornell Robinson's coaching out there, Luke Lillidow, Missouri kid. He ended up winning at 113. That Anthony Knox kid had a super match with Bo Bassett at 106. And normally you're like, these 106 guys, they can take a while for them to get good. They're just winning because they're small. Those dudes are stupid good. Like just Bo Bassett was just smashing fools, in the world championships and got beat 10-4. Like that's terrifying, right? Like there's just levels to the game. And these kids are all leveling up so quickly. And I mean, just, and obviously you're still coaching at college. Like I would argue, like if I was coaching at junior college, Give me all the kids that lost in the round of 16 and 24, and I'll put together a national championship team in junior college. And I would think NAI is probably pretty close to the same thing, round of 12, round of 16. If you could have the pick of the litter of those kids, you're going to have a dang good team at, Grandview or wherever else you're coaching at, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think once again, if you're on the radar, like you wrestle some tight matches with somebody that's, that Willie or any of the guys that are super invested into that age category, like put some weight on your name, and all of a sudden you have a great match for them. All of a sudden people take notice of that type of thing. And if you go into the round of 12 or you're your top 16, you should give, an opportunity for these coaches to get a hold of you. I mean, this is a really good opportunity for you to get seen by a ton of people. So.
For sure. And it's, that's gigantic. Just, you can make yourself a lot of money. Like, you could be off the radar and you place at Fargo and you place at this tournament, you could go from walk-on money to full ride money. There's, and then like KJ, who's already committed to like Little Rock, like he didn't place in Fargo and freestyle. He did in Greco. Then he goes and makes the finals here and loses to the number one kid in the country from Georgia. Like, if you're the Little Rock coaches, you're like, yes, like that helps you recruit other kids because you're like, this dude just did it, Marcus Hain, Thoroughbred Wrestling Academy, shout out to him for getting another kid in the finals. So if you're watching and not listening, we've gone share screen. So this is what we talked about a little bit. This is the document we used last year. We got a lot of cool feedback about this. This is GT's first year doing this with us, but it's really fun. Our goal isn't to critique or criticize anybody that's doing the rankings. Mark and I did the rankings for either 4 or 5 years at track. It is a thankless job. Division I coaches only call you when they think that you screwed up, and they only call you with the data that supports their guy being higher, and they will often omit the data on why their guy should be lower. Like, well, we beat the number 6 guy, right? But you lost to the number 27 and 28 guy. So Track Wrestling and WrestleStat are where we get most of the matchup results. Like, you can pull up a person's body of work there very quickly. And Seton Hall Pirates, a guy that literally puts out the schedule every week. And what I would do is just go through the schedule and look at anybody that, like, if Grant was number 1, if he won, that doesn't change anything. But if Grant was number 7 and he beat the number 2 guy, then we would put, like in this case, like we would put Patrick Glory, hey, he lost to Taylor Lamont. And then you have to decide, does Lamont go all the way up? Does Glory come all the way down? Do they meet in the middle? And that's where rankings become an art and not a science. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But right now we've got Intermat Flow, Amateur Wrestling News and Win. And my guy, Christian Thompson at fantasygrade.com does these averages, puts this together for us. So big shout to him. We've got about 13 minutes left. We'll probably just get through a couple weight classes because we wanted to this week and next week. And next week, we're going to be talking about the cadets and previewing the U23s. I think people really want to hear about the U23s because it's a bunch of college kids, that are wrestling in that meet. So here we are, GT. Here's the top 8. Spencer Lee, Patrick Glory, Vito Arujau, Brandon Courtney, Patrick Mckee, Drew Hildebrandt, Taylor Lamont, Sam Latona. Round of 12 guys are Teskey, Cardinale, Camacho, Barnett. And then your round of 16 guys are Schroeder, Foley, DiAugustino, Heinzelman. I'll just point out a couple of things. Foley's an All-American from previous years. Barnett was an All-American last year. And I will say this too. These guys are doing rankings different than I did them. What we would do, and I heard an argument like, well, anybody can just plug in what happened last year. Well, that's what matters. And I say this, like, I would rather be Mark Branch that went 8 and 9 and won nationals my freshman year than a guy than Max Askren, who was something in his freshman year and went 0 and 2. People remember what you did at the national tournament. Your legend is built on what you did at the national tournament. Alex Marinelli is an amazing wrestler who hasn't wrestled up to his seed yet. That's the knock on him. He's an amazing regular season wrestler. But I can tell you this, Alex Marinelli would give away a bunch of losses in the regular season to have won the national tournament a couple times. We all would have. You as a coach, like, you guys are chasing, you guys have won it almost every year. I talked to you right after you didn't win it. All you were talking about was how bad it burned that you didn't win it. Like, that's what matters. Doesn't matter if you beat that team in the regular season or not. It's showtime, and this is what counts. So I personally think that Barnett's ranked a little low. And I also think it's really tough for Courtney because he made the finals. Like, I think I would have justified probably putting him at 2. And then we talked about Suriano. You can't rank him right now because he's not on a roster, but he's going to plug in immediately. So when you see these names, and then the other couple things that are interesting down here, if you go down further, we don't know if it's going to be Ragusin or Jack Medley for Michigan. Ragusin's really big for 25, so they may redshirt him this year with Stevan Misek back. And then Missouri's got a nice problem with Connor Brown and Noah Certain. Connor Brown hurt himself right before the Max last year. I was like ranked in the top 16. Certain went through, made the finals, made the finals, lost to Hildebrandt, and then went like 2-2 at nationals, and then really had a good summer too. So when you look at these top guys, GT, who kind of sticks out to you, or interesting stories, or just anything like that?
Well, I'm really looking forward to the guys from the Ivy League coming back in and, getting an opportunity to compete again. Yeah. I'm a big fan of, just regular. I'm a big fan of competition. So like, I want these guys to get back into, competing on a regular basis, going and seeing them at like Cliff Keen or, Midlands or something like that, where there is more weight to what's going on. But as far as guys on this list, especially at 25, Vito is scary. I like that kid a lot. I think he's a talent with, some freestyle aspirations. Brandon Courtney had himself a great tournament last year. I think was, I don't want to say like, he was the 3 seed. He wrestled a great tournament. Like, I think he just wrestled super smart, great tournament. Also really good kid.
Yeah, really good kid.
And then there's the guys that I like kind of want to root for a little bit, because I'm also a fan, and I'm like, hey, the Hildebrandt Teskey match went down to the wire in the quarters. I think, either way, one of those guys makes the semis, that's a big deal. And I think both of those guys are super talented. Just want to see where they fall in the bracket at NC2As. And you're going to have a full season to figure out kind of where they deserve to be. Of course, like Rayvon Foley, being a previous All-American, Barnett being a previous All-American, can't count those guys out from year to year. Those guys. Yeah,
because they've done it. They've done it when it counted.
Because they've had good tournaments. And once again, all you're looking for at the end of the year is consistency, and you got to be tough. And once again, like if injuries pop up or, bad call or something crazy happens, that's what wrestling is. There are crazy calls. There's crazy tournament things. All of a sudden you get the flu like 2 weeks prior to the conference tournament. You don't have a great conference tournament. All of a sudden you're the 8 seed rather than the 3 seed.
Yes. And it was really difficult to seed last year because like the Big Ten only wrestled the Big Ten, that kind of stuff. So a couple things to point out here. I just highlighted Hildebrandt. I'm pretty sure he's done, but Amateur Wrestling News ranked him. I think once we confirm he's done, then everybody slides up a slot. Okay. I think I saw that on his Twitter. Second thing is Courtney. You mentioned, like you said, Courtney was a 3 seed, but Camacho beating Courtney in this 3-6 matchup was like a super popular pick. Like you and I play fantasy wrestling. We just saw a bunch of people that made that pick kind of thing, thought Camacho was a bargain. And obviously, like you said, Courtney ran the table to the finals and really wrestled Spencer as well as anybody has, obviously Spencer had no knees, but still super impressive. And then the third thing is this, and this was just interesting. Like I talked to Brandon or to Minnesota's coaching staff and Luke Becker and those guys and Schlater and Eggum. And I was like, why did Mckee wrestle so much better at nationals than he had all year? Because he was like the 16, 15 seed. And he deserved to be seated there. Like he had a really inconsistent season. And this is to your point, the other way. They said he didn't cut his weight well at times last year, and he cut his weight perfect for the nationals. They said it was the easiest he'd made it all year. He had super high energy, and he knew he was as good as all these guys. When he'd lost, he had done it to himself. And that's the stuff, obviously, you're trying to get your kids to make weight perfect. You're trying to get your kids to do everything right every time, right? Like you're still coaching. But those are teaching moments, right? And you can put your arm around a Patrick Mckee and go, hey, dude, if you make some sacrifices. If you sort of prioritize some things, you could be special here, man. You could do some things. You've been a winner at every level your whole life. There's no reason you can't be a winner at this level. And now that kid's got confidence. He had I think he almost had the most falls in the tournament. Like Gable Stevenson, they posted like how many pins Minnesota had. And Gable's like, well, there was Patrick and the rest of us each got one or something like that. So that's pretty cool when the Olympic champion daps you out like that,
Yeah.
So, this is an interesting way. Ton of returning All-Americans. Joey Prada comes in and moves in for OU. He's instant impact, especially in smaller tournaments and dual meets, because OU's the co-defending champion of the Big 12, and then Missouri's moving in. So Prada makes a big difference there where they weren't scoring any points there last year. So super interesting way. 33. RBY 1, Fix 2, Seabass 3, Misick 4, DeSanto 5, Myers 6, Lucas Bird 7, Michael McGee 8. In the round of 12, Cannon, previous All-American Philippi, Matt Schmidt, another Missouri guy, and then tied for 12th are Paetzel and Chance Rich. Round of 16 is Paetzel/Rich, Kolioko, whoever North Carolina has there, and Devin Turner. You go down the line, Greg Diakomahalis. They don't know whether, one source has him ranked, but I mean, he's an interesting name. Madrigal, a bunch of these guys from the Big 12, like everybody, like the 7 seed was making the finals and the 2 seed was like wrestling for 7th. So like the Moshe Schwartzes, the Madrigals, those guys are super interesting. Boo Dryden transferred from Minnesota to Nebraska. To me, this is super interesting because it feels like the top 4 guys are on a level. Seabass is back down to 33. Mark's super high on him. Fix might have had clearly had the best summer of anybody at this weight class. And Misick was the number 1 seed at the Olympics, albeit at 125.4. So when you look at this, what pops into your head?
I mean, this weight class is just absolutely stacked. I mean, if you throw in, so Dayton's a 2-time finalist, RBY national champ, potentially, Micic, number 1 ranked guy in the world at one point in time. Austin DeSanto is a machine. I think, he has great potential at this weight class. I mean, Seabass, once again, also super talented. And then you go all the way down to the 10, 11, 12 guys, Mckee Philippi, he's a beast. I think he beat Dayton when Dayton was a freshman. When he was a freshman.
Yes.
He's previously, I think, ranked 5th at the NCAA wrestling tournament before. There's some young up and coming guys. Chris Cannon, I was very impressed with him.
Yes.
Lucas Bird had a really good tournament last year. Corbin Myers, he's a beast on top. Once again, deservedly so. This is a stacked weight, and once again, like injuries and weight cutting all become a factor all the time. But these guys are seasoned. You can see there's a lot of seniors there between 1 and 12. So,
yeah. And Kolioko is another one of those guys that your Ivy League guy that sat out last year, got a ton of those club RTC matches in, and had a really good summer too in freestyle. This to me is an interesting weight because 9 of the top 10 guys have been on the podium. So it feels like it's going to be pretty difficult for somebody from outside of that group to break into the medals. And it feels like the top 3 to 4 are kind of on their own tier, right? I mean, like, it'll be interesting because I don't think Misick's wrestled any of these guys. I don't know if Rivera's actually beaten RBY, beat him at the Big Tens, last time they wrestled. So, I mean, you could argue, see, that's where people do these crazy rankings, right? Like if you go, we're going to go off head to head. So now Sebastian Rivera is number 1, I think where they blended Rivera in makes sense. He was an All-American at 141. He represented Puerto Rico in a couple of the world championships, those kind of things. But he's a 33 pounder. Like he didn't look super leaned out at 41. He's a 33 pounder. And he's a really dangerous 33-pounder. I mean, he's had some great wins in his career. He's beaten Spencer Lee. He's beaten Rovin Bravo Young. If you're going to pick a guy that's not seated in the top 2, that his hit list is probably as impressive as anybody's, right? Like, he beat the Hodge winner, and he beat the most marketable guy in wrestling besides Gable Stevenson and Ferrari, so, and a national champ. And RBY really out-wrestled Dayton in the national finals. He rode him. The only reason he even went to overtime was because of stalling calls, which, I love Dayton Fix. He's been on the pod and everything else, but I think a lot of people thought weren't deserved. And Dayton Fix, I think, jump levels this summer. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, you were there for a lot of that live. It'll be interesting to see if that level jump applies to these big matches. Like, it feels like he'll roll through the Big 10 or Big 12s again. Like, I think Schmidt is the next highest guy on this list. But when he gets to the semis and quarters and finals, is he going to keep pulling the trigger? When he pulls the trigger, he's stupid good. I mean, he destroyed Seth Gross. And Seth Gross would beat most of the guys on this list. So, I mean, can he make that transfer? If he makes that transfer, he's a dangerous man. And if you have a Dayton Rivera semifinal, like you said, get the popcorn, right? Like, that's must-watch TV, right? Like, I'm not answering my phone for 10 minutes. I don't care what's going on. I'm watching.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the if you would look at the national tournament the way that it's like seeded out here, if we just go off basically pre-seeds, you're talking about a Dayton Fix Seabass semi. You're talking about an RBY Steven Micic semi. In the quarters, you're looking at DeSanto Micic, echoes of the past.
Ripping arms out, yeah.
Like ripping arms out of their sockets, all sorts of things, right? I mean, if you can't get excited about some of this popcorn that we've just been talking about, Seabass and Corbin Myers, I think that's a freaking great tactical matchup.
Yes, because Seabass is a little better on his feet, but if it goes 0-0 that first period and Seabass and Myers gets to defer, that becomes a very interesting match. Like, do you take a chance on losing the period on your choice? Do you pick neutral and apply pressure, knowing you're probably going to be losing 1-0 one way or another? Myers is so good. He's almost like he can give up one takedown and still be in the match, So, yeah.
All of these things are really cool. And I just think that there's just a lot of depth here. And once again, I don't know how much time we have left, but it's one of those things that if you really want to nerd out and look at these matches and take your time and get into the statistics and all that kind of stuff, go for it, because you're going to have a blast doing it this year. This year has got so much opportunity for the conversations to happen.
And you guys can always just reach out to us on social. If you want to see our spreadsheet, we're more than happy to send it to you. We just are doing compilations of everyone else's rankings. Like we said, Mark and I did rankings. We have a ton of respect for the guys that do them, even if they use a different methodology or procedure than we do. We know that they all take it seriously. And when you sink time into it, you have to respect those people. We literally are up against the clock. So it's been a great pod. We love everybody that watches, listens, and shares. Thank you guys so much for the support. And we'll talk to you all next week.